Welcome to the Sunrise Project podcast, a space where we explore conversations on racism and reconciliation with neighbors in our community. And today we have the honor of getting to be joined by Emily. Emily, thank you so much for joining us here.
Oh, Gabby, I'm really happy to be here. I love time with you.
It's just such an honor. I love time with you too. Now today we have a special conversation that we've both been looking towards and looking forward to. And I've loosely titled it Understanding Racism Through Proximity. Now, a good place to start would be for us to define briefly proximity. We'll talk more about why it's meaningful, what it means, but what is a definition of proximity? What would you say?
Oh, that's a great question. Proximity is closeness or nearness. So it can be nearness physically, it can be nearness emotionally, it can be nearness informationally. But I really think that it's drawing near and turning toward.
Drawing near and turning toward.
What do you think?
I love that. I think of proximity very, very much like you do, that nearness. And there's something about story, the personalness of nearness, where you get to hear like a whole person, thoughts, feelings, experiences. I heard someone talk recently about how that proximity creates empathy, but I think it's because of that piece of like you get to see a person and say, "Oh,
That's right.
I get to walk in your shoes for a moment." So
Yes.
that kind of nearness.
Yes. Seeing another human as like another human.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
It's so simple and so beautiful, and also sometimes feels maybe a little hard
Yeah, or a lot hard.
or a lot hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a second working title for this.
I like the first one.
So I really like the first one.
Yeah.
But the second one was actually what prompted me to invite you to like share with us, because it's understanding racism through the heart of the one who holds her beloved and her children. Now, that's way more complicated, but I think what it brings light to is this element of proximity when you are building family, when you become family, and when you build family together. And there's a proximity that happens there that is like the closest that proximate can be with another human being. And now I use the term beloved because you refer to Mike as your beloved. And I remember hearing you do it in like just kind of normal life.
I didn't even notice it. That's funny.
It was just the sweetest thing.
Oh.
But I totally noticed. It struck me because it was precious. I too am a wife. I have a beloved, and it was just a sweetness there. But then there was this other layer of the beloved, like to understand racism through the eyes and the heart of those that hold a beloved, and the mother heart. The mother heart is like
incredible.
It's incredible.
Yes.
It's incredible. It's like no other thing on earth. And
That's
so
right, Gabby.
these two pieces, and I wanted to share another little piece. I have found that there, in my own journey, there are two groups of people that have been very impactful for me in my process of understanding racism and understanding it as it affects me as I carry it, you know, the racism in me and racism in our world. And those two groups are my Black brothers and sisters, that proximate, which is what we're really talking about there. But there's also this other group of white women who have become and built family with. And that my first experience of that was my mama. So I've talked before about my brother who's biracial, and the way my mama talks about racism is different. Like there's no barriers, like it's cleared out. And part of that is because she's done so much work on clearing it out. And part of it is, I think, because there are ways in which that mother heart for her, like, obliterated obliterated them.
Yes.
And I see that in you too, the ways you talk about it. I want to just like lean in and soak it up. Like tell me more, because I think you have a normal that is normal, not meaning common, but meaning most healthy. Like the way that you talk about racism as a white woman, and I'm sure part of this is because I'm a white woman, but I think it's also because of that mother heart, that beloved space. But the way that you talk about it grounds me. Like I want to like listen in and let it like wash over me, because it holds this proximity that is grounded and based in love and tenderness and compassion. You know, like it's just integrated. Yeah.
That feels very beautiful and also generous, but lovely to think about that, Gabby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I struggle even now to think about kind of who am I to even sit in this space and have this conversation.
Yeah.
Because what you said, that word process, I think I have been on a process, am on a process, have a long ways to go, right? And so I am just really aware of that. But I think that I'm also remembering that that process is a beautiful learning process. I'm on it with you, we're on it, and I have a long ways to go, but I am really glad to just talk with you today a little bit.
Yeah. It's so fun for me to remember. You know, we talk about process a lot in our podcast because it's so essential for us to remember that, and it's easy for us to forget.
Yes.
Particularly in something recorded, that like, this is going to be like, it's not going to move anymore, but I'm going to keep moving, and I'm going to learn in this process. Even whatever we share here, I'm going to be a different person at the end of it.
Yes,
so we talk about it all the time, and it's
hopeful.
it is hopeful. And I'm surprised to find that I forgot that I'd still need to talk about that with you. Like, of course, we are all in process.
Yes,
of course
we are. And I don't want to jump ahead, but I think now even of Emily 10, 15 years ago, you know, newly married when we married 19 years ago. And I have almost a grief for some of what I absolutely had no idea about, couldn't see, couldn't know. And now I go, I see that much more clearly. But that does speak to the beautiful capacity to continue learning. And I think that is the hopefulness. That really is, because like all around me in my life, I am blessed to see examples of co-learners, right? And so that reality is we haven't arrived. So we're learning together, and there's so much hope in that, because like there's transformation that happens that we can't even predict or anticipate or prescribe, but it happens.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. There are people that I'm tempted to forget are also still in process.
That's right.
How silly of me, but it's true.
That's right.
And that separates in a way that is not like it's a bit more of an idolization kind of separation.
Yes.
But it's still a separation. And
That's right.
And it does neither of us justice.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm also struck by this piece of compassion, but my thought left me, so we're gonna move on.
As thoughts do.
As they do. So let's actually dive in and talk about proximity.
Yep.
What is proximity? I mean, we gave a definition of it, but what is proximity, and why does it matter?
Yeah. So this question came to my mind recently in conversation with Mike, actually, was if we don't see it, if we don't experience it, does that mean it doesn't exist? Right? Yeah. And if it does exist, and folks are describing that it exists, and yet I don't see it and don't have exposure to it and don't experience it, is it real?
Yeah.
And so I think that often it takes a relationship, proximity, closeness, to listen to others' experiences, right? And to know that what I'm experiencing, Gabby, what I am seeing, what happens in my life isn't uniform for everybody, right? And so if other people are moving through their life having different experiences, some of those harmful and hurtful, am I turning toward, am I proximate and near enough to hear that and to, again, have a growing understanding and empathy for that? And so I think often we don't know what we don't know. And so we can easily dismiss experiences and lives and entire swaths of humanity because it's simply not in our sphere of exposure or proximity. And so I think as we endeavor, as we purpose to turn toward, to listen well, then we begin to hear the voices of others. Now, I think that there's some, people think of proximity or nearness and they think of it, especially like in the Rogue Valley. And I've had so many people say, like, I don't really have any people of color in my life.
Yes,
like, how can
yeah.
how could that look, right? And so the reality that's really, really incredible in this age that we live in is that there is so much access to so many places. And so the question is, am I intentionally creating networks where I'm learning from and listening to Black voices? I can do that. I can do that on LinkedIn. I can do that on social media. I can do that in a plethora of places. So am I purposing to listen to voices? Am I purposing to learn from? If I'm not in direct relationship, there are so many ways that I can turn my attention and turn my heart toward other voices. It's really quite possible.
Yeah.
And maybe it comes with just that seed of intention.
Seed of intention. I really like that because there are some spaces in which we might naturally reside where we might hear some stories or some voices.
Yeah.
But if we're passive in that,
Yeah.
and not seeking to hear other voices, voices that might sound like ours
Yes.
a bit, and not like that. I think that intention piece is really meaningful.
It is.
Yeah.
And it really is because we are compelled, I'm compelled to care, right? And so I think it's so easy in our lives as women and as mothers and as wives and all of the roles that we carry, our lives are full, and it can be very easy to just sort of move on in the lane that we're in. But because we increasingly understand that we are a part of this beautiful human family, we think we really want to care well about the lives and experiences of others. I want to care well about other people's children that are not my own. How can that look, and how can I do that? And so I can really start with, how can I gain a little proximity to others? How can I just begin to listen? And how can I do that in a way that I can just assume the best and sort of set down some of the things that I might be bringing into it, because we all bring in things. That's a part of my process even now. I mean, so how can we listen well to others?
And we live in an age where I'm just so thankful for the amount of books that are available.
Gabby.
Children's books for young adult readers,
Yes.
books for adults,
Yes.
stories that are written by.
That's right.
Now this is very key.
That's right.
Written by
That's right.
people that have this personal experience.
That's right.
It's so rich.
It's so rich
right
and so
now.
powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, I love
yeah.
that you mentioned children's literature.
Oh
I mean,
my
the
gosh.
capacity for
Yeah.
our families and our children
Yeah.
to read voices and experiences and stories
Yes.
of other children,
Of other children.
that are walking through their life. It embeds.
Getting chills.
I know it embeds a piece of this beautiful lens that we want our children to have, that we want
Yes.
us to have, right?
Yes.
And you're right. I mean, there are so many books by so many authors. I mean, you and I could rattle off a dozen right now that are
Yeah.
just like, oh,
Yeah.
how incredibly valuable and important. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have learned from this person.
Oh my
so
goodness.
grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is like down to like picture books.
Oh, for sure.
Like it's every layer of literature we
That's
have
right.
at our fingertips.
That's right.
Where we can become proximate. And that's
it,
I mean,
Gabby.
that's a huge piece. We live in a majority white community.
Yes, we do.
Like this is just in a majority white area. Like this is just the reality of it.
Right.
Which actually brings up another piece. What's the value in becoming proximate to our neighbors of color when that's not something that, you know, like why should we prepare our children in this way?
Wow.
Or ourselves?
Yeah. That's a great question. We're raising biracial children, and so our hope in equipping them is that they might be equipped with a lens of empathy, so that because of their proximity to others and others' proximity to them, and our children's proximity to understanding systems and lives and other people, that they would then grow, Gabby, to be humans that are able to look around and imagine and reimagine and create.
Yeah.
And so we want that the Green family is an outward facing. We want to equip and empower. But I think on the other end, why do we want the majority of white children to have proximity, to have empathy, to have understanding? And why do we hope for that? And I think, again, as a mama, we recently had a pretty painful experience with our boys being called a really terrible name by the parent of a neighbor, our friend. And I don't often feel rage, but there was something so devastating and enraging about learning that. A couple of things happened. Number one, I thought, surely if they knew my boys, if they knew them, there's no way they would have said this, because, oh my goodness, do you know my boys? Do you know our family? No. And then I thought, how many mamas in our nation have seen their children treated so horribly and thought, if you only knew my baby, like, oh, my incredible boy, like, I just felt a sudden wave of grief for women who have had to see their children experience such injustice, right? So that was one piece of it. And the other piece of it is I thought that the fact that right now in 2024 on our sweet little street, in our little neighborhood, other parents are referring to our boys this way reminds me that the issue of race is not resolved. And I felt a frustration again that the conversation of why are we still talking about race? Well, we're still talking about it because this is actually present, right? This is now. And since this is now, we have to realize that this remains unresolved. That's it. And so what do we do? and I will share one of my, I did go and meet the parents and in my heart of hopefulness thought, can I plant a seed of goodwill and neighborly introduction? But that's a very micro. macro, this reminded me again that when children are raised in schools and environments that primarily fill them with a certain narrative that leaves out big swaths of truth, then those children grow to be adults. And so those adults have particular perspectives. And again, it is imperative that in schools, if we just can kind of think about the education of our children, that our children are reading textbooks and are receiving instruction. I think to myself, if children right now, this is such a complete dream of mine, but if all of our babies in schools right now were reading from books and learning from educators that had this lens of valuing of humanity, that had this priority of telling the stories of all the peoples, that told the story of our nation, good, the bad, the beautiful, like just shared it, and so that our children had this grounding in truth. Whew. If all of those millions and millions and millions of teachers and schools and children were sort of raising up with this lens, and I think, oh, then our babies would be growing up, and then they would be looking around. Like, my deep hope is that our boys are even now with eyes that are saying, hey, what about, and how can we, because the beautiful thing about children is that they have this incredible resilience around learning information. We see this all the time with our boys, so that they just learn truth and they integrate it into their paradigm, into their frame of reference. And so they can spot things are not fair, and how can we design this? And so I think what incredible potential for children that can grow and then can be the adults that are designing and including and imagining and creating and welcoming. That's my hope, and that is my flip side of that is my discouragement about the efforts that I see to undermine a lot of that's happening in schools. And I think, let's as we hear, news clips and things, let's really ask some questions. Let's not be put off by a catchphrase or a term that might sort of be a trigger word, but let's dive a little deeper as parents. Let's learn a little bit about more. Maybe what is that? I do want to share, speaking of learning, that we homeschool, but one of the history books that we were using this year, by all means, like a great book recommended by the local charter school. And so we're reading through it, and there was an example that I was doing with one of my boys about, picture yourself, it had the children, if you're in the mid-1700s in colonial New England and you're walking down the street bustling. And I thought to myself, my boys wouldn't be walking down the street in New England. They would have been enslaved. Like, literally this entire chapter 1, page 2, imagine it. It does not. It's actually not true. Not just for my boys, but for millions and millions of children of color that are reading that text. Well, one small example. And I thought, there's so much of this, page upon page, that if I hadn't really done a lot of my own work, I may have missed it, right? So, yeah.
I have to say, my heart fills in hearing you speak, Emily, and it's just another moment of, if we want to know what, I'm going to use the word normal again, because we're assuming a healthy functioning body. If we want to know what normal is, let's listen to the mamas.
Let's do.
What are the Black mamas saying?
Right.
What are the white mamas saying? Because the mamas see it in a today grounded, real way. And so often we miss that.
We do, Gabby. What are those mamas worried about right now?
Right now. Because they're going to see it.
That's right.
What should we do next? Let's listen into the mamas, because they're going to have an eye.
That's right.
Yeah.
So how can we as mamas be purposing to listen well to other mamas? How can I listen well to Black mamas who are raising their children? What are they sharing with me as their concerns right now?
Yes.
What are they hoping for? What are they worried about for their kids today? How can I how do I know that? Like, am I Yeah. I need to.
This reminds me of another story for myself. So when I moved to Grants Pass and heard about the Sundown Town history, I'd never heard that term before. And it was given to me as a curfew sign. And I have to be honest, if my brother if that didn't relate to him, I don't know how much I would have cared.
Yes.
I
Gabby.
might have been, oh gosh, I can't believe it. And then kind of moved on.
Yes.
And there's this way in which even so a sibling, a brother is a whole different kind of relationship than a mama. But there is a proximity there
For sure.
that I knew that racism existed. And I knew it was a current thing.
Yes.
And I knew my brother was a person. I mean,
Yes.
You're grounded in this humanness.
Yeah.
And I loved him, even with all of our, he's my brother. Of
That's
course
right.
we've got dynamics, but I loved him. And it really was that caused me to say, wait, what? What's the history here? What's going on? Is it still like that? Is he going to be welcome? Just because the sign's not there doesn't mean he's not going to, is this still here? The sign's essentially meaningless. I mean, it's a spirit of how people are. And I wanted to know, and that mattered to me.
I love that.
And I feel like that proximity normalized me. That's a normal reaction. Hearing you feel what you feel about what happened to your boys is a normal reaction to injustice and to hurt to another human being.
So how do we, if we're not personally impacted or proximate, care?
Yeah.
How do we engender care?
Yeah. I think there's something for me about naming, if I'm not proximate,
Yes.
I think it's safe to assume that I might not care in ways that would be normal? You know what I mean?
Gabby. You
my
don't have
normal
the same
stance.
reaction or feeling that rises in you if the thing is way out of sight.
Yeah. And I think we can also say, because of the history of our country, we're not working off of a blank slate.
That's right.
And so whether we live in a white community, a majority or all white community, whether we have friends or not, whether we interact with people of color or not, it is our personal responsibility to say, I need to spend some time here at some intention at some point in my life.
Yes,
Maybe
Gabby.
there will be seasons of deeper intention. I had a season of deep intention after that conversation. Oh gosh, my first couple years here in Grants Pass, I had a season of deeper intention in listening. Now I was proximate to my brother, but there was so much that I didn't understand or know, and my seasons since have looked different. They've been a weaving in and weaving out of, but I was soaking up, it was books. I was soaking up books. It was just book after book. My husband was like, what is going on here? What's happening?
Are you at the library again?
And, at the time, I did not know, it took me some days to be like, honey, I'm actually not sure, what's going on here? And finally I was like, I think it's just a part of my story because it's a part of my brother's story. And though that's true, there's another piece now that I would say to myself then that this is a part of our story. For me, it gave me, because I didn't know quite for what purpose. We lived in a majority white community. I knew nobody of color in my personal life at daily life at that time. and I needed a reason. But I don't think we need that reason.
So
Like
good.
even now I'm like,
Yes.
that's like, I'm glad that I'm glad I had something
That
to
sort
kind
of
of
spurred
give to
that-
somebody that like, it's my story because it's my brother's story.
Oh,
Like, I'm
right.
glad I had something I could give to him. But there's this piece now from this perspective that I'd say it's bigger than that. Like, this is my story too, because I'm a human being.
That's it.
That's it. And I'm an American. I might add that piece. I'm a human being and I'm an American.
Yes.
And so it
as
needs, as such,
we
it's
are
my
in
story
it
too. We
is.
are in this.
We
Whether we
are.
are white or we are black or whatever their skin color, we are in this.
That's right.
And it's as much mine as it is my brother's. It's not mine because of my brother. You know what I mean? It's not yours because of your child
That's
or
right.
your husband. Like, it's yours because it's yours.
That's right.
Like, you
Because
are
it's
human.
ours.
It's ours.
It's ours.
It's all of ours.
It's our American story.
It's personal.
I think there's something so wonderful about understanding the construct of race, how race was created and utilized and systematized in our nation. Because as soon as we have that understanding, we go, oh, I can see.
Yeah.
There is this thing, this construct that created this thing that we're still dealing with. And so here I can see the construct. I can see how it was. And here's what I know. We are this human family. It's been artificially, ridiculously divided, separated, and horrific things have happened under this banner of this false construct of race. And so let's just see it for what it is, and then say, no, not on my watch. On my watch. On my watch, I'm actually just going to look around me. I'm going to purpose to have proximity. I'm going to learn to listen well. I'm going to love well in my actions.
Yeah.
And let's continue that process of learning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that also brings light to why proximity is so essential to racism. As white people, in the context of the construct that we created in our country,
That's right.
we were at a top of a hierarchy, and we will remain in that space unless we become proximate. Like,
Yes, sister.
there's this way in
sister.
which that's just gonna happen. Like, this is the systems are here, the way of life. We've taken down the signs, we've taken down different pieces, but it still lives in us. We are more connected than we know or than we want at times, but there's a beauty in that connection that will come.
Gabby, yes. Yes.
I know, right? It's a deep breath. I have some. I want to read this piece. This is from Henry Nouwen. It's a quote on compassion, because I feel like proximity, that it bubbles up a compassion and empathy, that closeness connects you. Compassion is a natural thing that happens when you connect with another human being.
Yes.
It just
It just
wells
does.
up.
Yes.
It just does.
Yep.
So showing mercy, and he calls it mercy for a moment here. Showing mercy is different from having pity. Pity connotes distance, even looking down upon. Mercy comes from a compassionate heart. It comes from a desire to be an equal. I love that. I feel like proximity is that it's that desire to be equal.
It is.
That element of, no,
Because we are.
I name you as because you are equal, I will come close and hear what you have to say. And what will naturally, we don't have to make compassion happen. We just have to change our positioning.
Oh,
and then it just
beautiful.
comes.
Change our positioning.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to mention that it can feel burdensome, I guess we'll say, to do some of this work of even thinking about becoming proximate. I've heard some of my friends say things like, homeschool mama. Like I have so many kids. I have a home that I'm taking care of. Like there's so much. My life is so full. Like I don't have time to do this additional piece, add this thing. And there's two thoughts that I have. I want to hear what you think. But that piece of, there's going to be a connected way that you can do it right in the midst of where you're at. Like you don't need to add some other strange piece. Like
for sure.
You've got a bunch of kids. You're reading them books.
Bring
in books.
There
Look at that. Like you're already
right.
doing it. Maybe
That's
it's not a real life person you're adding into your world. Like,
right.
But there are ways connectedly where that happens.
That you and your children can be learning from and listening to other voices in your learning. It's
the
beautiful.
thing that you're already doing.
That's great.
It can
expand
weave
it a little bit.
into the thing that, expand it a little bit. Yep. And then there's this other piece that Brian Stevenson says, acts of compassion and kindness can be the most restorative and energizing acts for ourselves. I just love that piece that we forget.
We forget that there's actually a mutually beautiful relationship here.
Yes.
It's not
mutual.
Me extending and pouring out and being burdened and being, it's me turning toward, actually unaware of what beautiful thing might unfold. Both ways. Both ways.
Yeah, both ways. That this proximity, again, it's not pity. Pity and distance.
Right.
I almost would say, if you're feeling burnt out in a situation where you're seeking to care for, or you might want to use the word compassion, I would say the first thing to check on is, how close are you?
Yes.
Because if you're not close enough to be blessed by them, to have that mutuality, then it is exhausting to pity.
For sure. And also pity kind of connotes, like I can't imagine the women that I'm in relationship with, Black women, I can't even fathom pity crossing my mind because it's like
such strength
I mean, I am learning from, I am inspired by, I am blown away.
The wisdom and the depth.
There's no pity.
Yeah. It's gone.
Oh,
it's not even an element. Yeah.
Because we're humans.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about that piece that if we don't become proximate, there's a way in which I just love this piece when I run into those moments where we're so interconnected that I can't parse it out anymore.
Yes.
Like when you become proximate, it's you are obliterating that distance that makes you only an I. Yes. And so this we thing happens, and this whole thing shifts when that happens. It shifts for you, it shifts for them, and suddenly there's this thing that you can't say that you're doing it just for you, and you're not, it's just interwoven so closely.
Totally.
It's deeply mutual.
I am thinking, and it's a little tangential to proximity, but I'm thinking of when I went to Birmingham with Mike, and I wanted to hear that story. Reminds me again. So he was invited to speak at a conference 2 years ago, and also again this year. And so when we went 2 years ago, I remember just ahead of the trip having this awareness. Oh, this is a conference for Black businessmen and entrepreneurs and really influential, smart, incredible people in Birmingham. And it occurred to me that I'm probably going to be one of the only white people there. And I had a little bit of, again, thinking then, this is my husband's experience. Like, again, speaking of process, like, this is the awareness that he carries every day in our city. But so I went to Birmingham, had the most incredible time. Came back this year, and this year, as we were walking into the conference year 2, Mike and I were talking, and I said, "It's incredible. I don't feel any apprehension. It was just so beautiful." And I said, "Why do you think that is?" And so we talked about how a sincere sense of welcome and humanity absolutely obliterates disconnection and discomfort. It just does. It just does. And here's the truth. The truth is, over those several days, I felt such true human connection, just the beauty of conversation. I felt welcomed and just absolutely, it was just not even on my radar. And that was such a beautiful experience for me, and the juxtaposition. So Mike and I talked about how that juxtaposed for him. And again, you know my husband a little bit. He's so loath and so hesitant to ever bemoan or share a negative thing or try to, but he was able to say that that's different than the welcome, or the experience that I have had living here. It's just different. And I thought in that moment, wow, we have such capacity. You know, it's bigger than it's bigger than just one-to-one relationships, but it also is one-to-one relationships. And there is so much power in the way that we live welcome and the way that we live just a sincere heart presence, human to human. Like, it's so good. And yeah.
Can you articulate even more what that, for you, that experience of welcome, like, what did that look like? What did that, like, what were the details of it that we could also possibly translate to how could we embody that here?
Yeah. I mean, again, from start to finish, every human that I met, I felt this skin color was just a non-issue in the conversation, in everything that happened over the course of days. There was just real conversation. There was real laughter. There was food. There was dancing. There was community. There was fellowship. There was learning together, sitting in conference. I mean, there was just so many experiences where we were just side by side, laughing and joking and learning, and all of it together felt just really lovely. And so I think really that practice is like, how can we actually in our lives, as we encounter other people, we've talked about this, and that other can come in so many different shapes, but that sense of sincere presence and welcome, that's discernible and sensed and felt, and it's true. And so we can offer that.
Yeah, it is. There's something I think about, I'm trying to think of like body language. Like, what does that look like? A sincerity. I think of the word open.
Yeah.
I think of, in our culture, I don't know if it's every culture. I'm trying to think right off the bat. Eye contact. There's this there's like this openness. There's a turning, even your body turning towards. That's like, right, like there's so many ways in which, and it's worth naming that we don't have to be turning away. We don't have to be, like, we can have a closed or even a nervous, even like a self-awareness that communicates to the other person a not welcome. And it doesn't mean that it's I am not welcoming you. Like, there's also I just don't know what to do with you. Right. And we forget sometimes that piece might be where a lot of us, I don't really know what to do with you. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm self-conscious. Am I going to do the wrong thing? All of those kinds of things that like if we don't do a bit of that personal work, we're not just going to be open.
That's right.
When someone comes to us. And you're right, it is. We have so many others in our world that this work, again, that interconnectedness piece, any work you put into seeking to become proximate in this conversation on racism will be used fruitful in every other area of your life, because I guarantee all of us have others or them or whatever word. I mean, we don't use the word enemy anymore, but these are all those that we would like to distance from. We would like to, it would be easier in life if you weren't around. That's essentially what it is.
That is.
My life would be easier if you weren't here. We all have somebody that we either say that to very comfortably, or we are tempted to say that to, but we don't say it, but we definitely think it.
Right.
Like it's
Right.
like any work that we put into this, any intentionality of proximity
Yes.
in this conversation of racism will be fruitful in the rest of our lives. It's
Gabby,
just
it will.
worth it.
It is worth it. And I think our flourishing, all of our flourishing is beautiful for all of us. And I always think of this example, again, kind of a sidebar to this, but I think of all of the incredible children that are in schools that are underserved and underfunded. And I think of the brilliance and potential of so many of these kids, primarily Black and brown kids in high poverty schools around our nation. And I think, what would it be if we had really the incredible potential of all of these beautiful babies really supported? And like, how much would all of us benefit if all of us were benefiting? And so, wow, there's just, there's something about everyone thriving, or all of us really. I mean, when we come back to why should I care, and that's a question that comes up, or why does it matter to me? Well, it matters because we really all are blessed in community and as a nation when all of us have the support, the infrastructure, the opportunities to thrive well, right? Because we all are designed beautifully.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that every single human has this incredible imprint, this beautiful design. And so how can our living support that?
Mm-hmm. Right. It's astounding how easy it is for us to believe that we don't have enough, or that scarcity mindset. Like it's astounding how easy that can slip in and actually be the root of some of our feelings and responses, but we don't notice that, like, oh, I don't think there's enough. Like that's right. That's really what's going on here.
What's really fun? What's really fun about that, and what I love about the way that Mike does this in our home, is we'll have little like exercises, let's talk about how schools are funded. We actually, literally yesterday, the day before, the boys were talking about different schools, school funding, and because I don't know what was in the news, but if you kind of break it down, it sort of demystifies some of this stuff. That whole like we don't have enough scarcity about maybe school funding, and it can be this big, oh, we can't. But if you it's fun and helpful to peel back the emotion and to sort of look at, hey, how is this thing built? What are the pieces that created it? And now let's maybe we could move the Lego pieces. Let's just think about it.
Yeah.
And kids are so fantastic. Our boys will go, what about, and how about, let's, and again, instead of that, what is it in us that's sort of that emotion of it's mine, or there isn't enough? What about if we think of just reconfiguring things differently? We don't have to, but let's just think about it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that sort of exercise of brainstorming.
Yeah.
It can be hard because it can push up against some of our attachments or things, but
yeah,
it can be helpful.
Yeah. I've been thinking just recently on what are the precursors to curiosity? Like how do you create, how do you help someone be curious?
Gosh, that's beautiful question.
Because I feel like curiosity is
it's a most beautiful starting place.
It's a most beautiful starting place.
It just really is.
But it's so hard for us to be curious.
And
I do think
there's a threatening piece in the curiosity? Is there a fear?
I think so. And I think part of it is connected to this there's not enough. Like I've got to hold on, and that piece of like so there's a safety element. Like if you feel safe, there's a way in which you can become curious. But then there's a false safety of comfort. I don't think comfort necessarily stirs up curiosity.
No, and we are largely a culture that prioritizes our personal comfort. And so I think that kind of is another, that's a whole other conversation we'll have to have someday about just that sort of individual versus collective. Mm-hmm. That is always endlessly interesting to talk about. But yes, we do prefer comfort, of course, and threats to comfort feel uncomfortable. So,
Yes.
yeah, but I love that. How to spark curiosity, Gabby. I'm going to be thinking on that because it's beautiful. And the question always comes back to me. How can I be more curious? I think it's, I mean, I can wish for this, but I can say, Emily, how can curiosity grow in you? What can you be more curious toward? Right?
I think hope that for me personally, the moments when I'm not curious, I tend to also be really inner focused. Like I've got to take care of myself. Yeah. And if I'm not taking care of myself, like if I do that thing, it's going to be too burdensome. I won't have enough time. I'm not going to be able to, like all of those pieces. Yes, now I don't know how this relates to hope anymore, but oh well. But those kinds of pieces really do get me more inner focused, which is interesting. It like continues to build this barrier where when we do release that, and sometimes it is just a jump. But sometimes it's a baby steps of trusting that like I can listen, or I can. Yeah.
I mean, Mike said the other day, and as followers of Christ, we have this sense each day of like, Mike says, what if we wake up each day with a how can I serve lens instead of how can I be served, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the beauty of God's economy, honestly, is that as we look outward with our effort, our energies, our focus, our curiosity, boy, we don't even know how that comes back in ways for us and our family and in the future that we just can't even estimate. And so my encouragement for myself and for you is, even as we sort of can count the cost, let's look at a different economy of things and sort of.
Yeah. I feel like that economy goes back to that piece of how acts of kindness and compassion that, Brian Stevenson can be the most restorative and energizing acts for ourselves. Like that's not why we do it, but like that's what we discover. When we move outside of ourselves, we discover that we're taken care of in that process. And it's so counterintuitive that you have to like train yourself and tell yourself, no, this is, and in my language, I would say that's why it's an act of faith. You're trusting that like this, there are times when I'm going to do this thing because I know that I'm going to be okay. But it does matter to have someone say, hey, you're going to be okay. I think we can do that for each other.
We can, Gabby.
You're going to be okay. It's okay to step out and be curious. You're going to be okay.
You are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
we can
good.
say that to our neighbors. You're going to be okay. I know it feels scary. You're going to be okay. This is good. Now, I want to dig into, and some of these things you've answered, but sometimes when you get a direct question, So as a beloved, so this is in the context of your relationship with Mike. As a beloved, you are proximate to racism in a way that most white people are not proximate. What has that proximity meant to your own process of understanding the hurts and wounds of racism?
That's a beautiful question. So I will share a little story and then sort of think about it together a bit. So last year, Mike was coaching one of our boys on a sports team, and he's just an incredible coach, just a great teacher and so beautiful, and just it was a great season. But there was one practice where a group of the darling boys that he coached said some really terribly racist jokes to him. No, coach, we're not talking about you, but they continued on. And he sort of, as he does, rebounds, hey guys, let's get back to da-da-da, and told me about it that night. And I was, I'll tell you, Gabby, honestly, my first thought, and I said the words to him, like, let's go. Like, I am so weary of you, I'm saying to him, having to experience this all the time. I am so weary that when my husband walks onto the field as an assistant coach, he immediately carries with him the realization that every player, parent, and coach is going to see this black man walking on the field. My girlfriend's husbands don't feel they could just jump in and coach. But my husband carries with him at every practice this added awareness that that is how he's being seen. And then there are moments like that moment where you realize, oh, this is the frame of mind, this is the belief, this is the ideology of the home environment of these kids. This is real. And I want to leave. So I say, can we just go to family in Texas? I am so weary of him having to walk that. I want him to just be one of many Black coaches on the field and just have the ease of being a human on the field doing the coaching thing and not have the added constant everydayness of this burden. And so, that was sort of my, I just felt like I'm done. I'm done for this for you. And he says, babe, what a blessing it is that I can be here, that I can perhaps be one example of a relationship that these boys have with a coach that they can in their mind go, hey, I had this Black coach once, and what a blessing that I get to choose to love and to serve in this way and to build that bridge. So that is one picture of the experience that I can forget the dailiness of this reality. It is a burden that he walks with. And knowing him, there is nobody on the planet that I think is actually a more incredible human being. So the juxtaposition of knowing his heart, his integrity, his character, and then knowing that this incredible human has this experience routinely is so abominable to me. It's just unacceptable. No, it's unacceptable because you should, if you knew him, surely I can't. So that is, he actually said last night we were laying in bed talking about Willie Mays, because there was a big ceremony for Willie Mays, a retired baseball player who passed away. And Mike always seizes these learning moments with our boys. And so he says to me, well, if the boys, they didn't know who Willie Mays was. And if they didn't know Willie Mays, we have to start with Jackie Robinson. So they spent a lot of time. Again, this is an idea for us as parents. You see a little thing come up and you just build on it in the moment, spontaneously. Hey, let's learn a little bit about. So they watched some videos and did this whole learning. So the boys now have this incredible little contextual story of like race and baseball. And like just that story is a part of their database. So we're laying in bed talking about it. And he says to me, and I actually wrote it down because I felt very tearful last night, but he said, babe, our boys need a childhood. I want them to have a childhood, yet they must be aware. He said, it's the burden that he carries. He said, it's not your burden, babe, it's my burden, but I have this burden as their dad. They have to be aware so that they can navigate this. But I also just want them to have a childhood, right? So that is, I get glimpses of what he's carrying, what he's holding, what he's experiencing. And it's a lot.
Yeah. I am having a moment personally of in hearing that story. So this is real time.
Yep.
We become proximate to you.
Yep.
In hearing that story, I feel more motivated to carry that burden too. And that is an answer to why do we talk about these things in a majority white community? Because our neighbors have to talk about them.
Yes.
And they have to talk about them. And we can share that burden so that whether or not a Black man is present and choosing to redirect or educate or whatever it be when there are racist jokes happening, that the white people that are present there can do that we would be ready, that we can take the intention so that we're ready to respond. I heard a story of a friend who, she just shared this recently, goes to church in town, was at a small group gathering. She is a Black woman herself. She was at a table of white women. And a mom shared about a joke kind of thing that was a racist joke, and nobody said anything. Nobody knew what to do, and it was a joke that came in she was able to kind of say it was like her daughter's story. So it was like someone said something about, oh, kids don't, they say the darndest things, some kind of, but it wasn't addressed. None of those white people were ready to say anything. And that piece of, this burden should not be only Mike's to carry. This is our burden to carry. Are we ready to carry it? Have we prepared ourselves? And it doesn't take every day of your life to do it, like sometimes it's just that an intentional season of, I'm going to become proximate so that I can be prepared. That's a biblical, the be ready to give an answer when someone asks you, like that.
So
that
become
we're ready.
proximate in order to be prepared.
Yeah, because it's going to happen. We live in a community where we should be ready to carry this burden, because the burden is being carried. It's being carried by our neighbors.
It is, Gabby.
So are we coming in to join in on carrying that burden, or are we saying, I don't know, I like this comfort of not having to feel the weight, and so I'm just not going to carry the burden.
That's a word. Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to ask this question, and we might go over our usual hour today, and that's might just be something that happens, because there's a few other little pieces. What has proximity meant to your own process of understanding hope and healing that is possible?
That's a great question. I feel like we've touched on it a little bit, but I think that what I actually think about when I think of the hopefulness in this situation is that as I've seen people in my life deepen their proximity, they've had experiences, like we sort of talked about, that beautiful reciprocity, that I've actually firsthand seen the beautiful reciprocity of proximity that's unfolded for people in my life. And the way that has blessed them, blessed each other, and created this growingness. And so I think that we can never underestimate or even anticipate or imagine what might follow if we simply say, let me turn towards something and someone that's a little unfamiliar. Let me listen in. Let me hear a little bit of their heart. Let me hear what they're saying. Let me read what they're sharing. Let me listen under them or learn about them. And then let me just kind of sit with that. And let's see what sort of then unfolds that we can't even prescribe or imagine.
I gotta say, my hope is so big right now. Like, my hope has only grown in the process of being in process and being intentional in this area. Obviously at the same time, there's a growing awareness of the deep wound that is there. And so, there are days where there's a tension,
yes,
but most definitely has the hope grown.
Yes.
And I experience it. Maybe that's part of it. Mm-hmm. I experience it, so it helps me ground in what can be possible.
That's so true. As we participate in it, we experience it. And then we are even deepened in our hopefulness.
Yeah.
But we have to participate. We have to get kind of in the process.
Yeah, you have to get in the
You
process.
have to kind of have to get in the game a little. You just have to get in the process. You have to jump in.
And it's
then
really
you can,
tempting for us to not. It's tempting for us to kind of, and we talk about it still, but we don't actually get in the process. It's almost, I have this terrible ability to like have an opinion on anything, and it's really bad. So I could hear something that I really know nothing about, and have an opinion and feel some kind of emotion around that, like some kind of passion. Like I'm a passionate person, so I've grown in my awareness of like, oh my gosh, I can know nothing and have an opinion. And so it's been...
Oh, that's right. Opinions can be held even when you have actual no facts. Knowledge or facts.
Nothing. No experience, nothing. Like you could pick something from somewhere, and I'm sure it would probably happen in me. Like this is...
A feeling and an emotion, like, but maybe no
but
actual
nothing,
grounding in
no grounding whatsoever.
Yes.
So I've grown in my awareness of like, oh, I'm able to do this kind of thing. And so I have worked, and I still have to work hard on, if I'm going to say anything, then I have to be willing to listen and really find out and ask questions and like be in a position where what I say has nothing to do with my feelings, because my feelings I can say a lot based on my feelings, but it's nothingness, it's meaninglessness, it's distraction to other people, it's distraction to myself, it's a lie to myself, it's a lie to other, like I shouldn't, like I need like a mouth guard for so many things.
So you have no idea what you're saying actually taps into something Mike and I have been hashing out together in our home recently. And that is, can somebody have a belief about something about which there's maybe a lack of information? And I have thought, well, they can, but what you're saying is actually, maybe it's not a belief, it's just a really strong feeling about something. It's just a
really strong feeling.
Because Mike would say, well, that feeling upon examination, 1 to 2 steps of inquiry in, can be revealed as like being something that you really believe in, or something maybe you just have an emotional attachment to based on familiarity, based on whatever. Oh, that's really good. So we can have feelings about something that we might think we believe in, but that belief really does withstand and should withstand, welcome even, some dialogue to sort of unpack it.
Yeah. I have found personally for myself, now there are things that I can learn about myself, me, from those feelings. Like I clearly get passionate about this and about this and about that.
Yes.
And so I can learn about myself, but it is totally not connected to that outside thing, because I don't know what that actual outside thing is in the details. I don't know its origin or what the details are of the conversations or the nuances or the and we're bombarded in our world with so much information that we think we can have opinions on this information.
Or little sound bites of information.
Little tiny things.
But really, let's purpose to actually dig beneath the soundbite, dig beneath the tagline, and really learn about it, and even welcome learning from other people and dialogue about it, so that we can actually be informed with some real good information.
Yeah, so that I'm not just saying something that you could learn from. You could learn about who I am, but that actual thing that we're talking about, like that's what's going on. So it's been a hard practice for me to I shouldn't say anything on these topics because I don't actually know anything about these topics, and I can think that I do. May I keep being in process?
Oh, that's a really good word.
Is there anything else that you would like to get to share or say? Or
I feel like we've covered so many beautiful things today. I guess I would like to leave us all with the invitation to maybe there's one area of our life, of the thing that we believe with a lot of feeling. Maybe in these coming weeks and months, we might just allow that to soften a little and listen from other voices about that particular topic. And maybe even as we approach this coming election season, maybe there's different things that are coming up, different voting things. And maybe we would pick one that we have a lot of feeling about, and we would determine to learn from somebody who has a different perspective. You know, that has just been life-changing for me, because paradigm shifts are so hard. Oh, they're so uncomfortable. Oh my goodness. They continue to be uncomfortable. So I am right there with all of us who are, learning and unlearning. But wow, on the other side of a paradigm shift can be some really good growth. And so maybe in these coming weeks and months, we might really determine one issue or thing to listen well to somebody else about. And just kind of sit with it and see. There's so much that we can step into, and my mind is swirling with all of the things, but maybe even additionally, how can we all choose proximity in a way that isn't just overwhelming, but in a way that says, hey, how can I value and esteem other humans in this way? If I'm on LinkedIn, how can I listen and learn from some extraordinary Black authors and scholars and writers and teachers? I mean, even Mike and I talk about the different music. We can listen to different music if you're a musical family. Like, there's just so many ways that we can open the door just a little bit and see what comes from that.
Right where we're at.
Right where we're at.
Right where we're at.
Because we can.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. How can we become proximate?
Mm-hmm.
Right where we're at, with our life looking like it's looking.
Yes.
Doing the things that we do. How could we increase
Our
just
proximity.
a little bit our proximity? Yeah. I am filled with hope with those two invitations. And I'm filled with hope for those of us that are listening, and even if you can't imagine what it is yet, just that sitting with, I'm going to sit with this question.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's all we can do is,
Yes.
I'm just going to let this be around for a while.
Yes.
And then you start noticing. You never know what you're going to notice. Just sit with it for a while, because something might come and something might grow, and
That's right.
beautiful thing. Yeah. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabby. This was a real gift for me. Thank you.